takes before I get the pronunciation of this film right? I'm guessing loads. Let's find out. Hello Internet, my name's Lave, and this week I watched Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children first try. So this film is based on a set of books which I haven't read, so I couldn't tell you if it's a good adaptation of them or not. This is I watched, not I read. So this film is directed by Tim Burton. Now I'm going to come back to him in a mo. For now I'm just going to jump into the plot summary, which picks up in contemporary Florida and follows a kid called Jake, played by Asa Butterfield, whose grandfather told him fantastic stories of a foster home full of strange kids with weird abilities that he was a part of when he first emigrated to the UK during World War II. So Jake's not entirely sure how much of the stories were true, so he sets off to find this home, which he does, and it turns out that his grandpa was telling the truth. It's run by a weird woman called Miss Peregrine, played by Eva Green, and is full of all these kids with weird and wonderful powers. You could say that they're peculiar kids. You might even say that they're mutants. They're mutants. Yeah, Tim Burton's X-Men coming at ya. So we find out that their home is under threat by monsters and a baddie called Baron, played by Samuel L. Jackson, who's kind of a mix of his characters from Kingsman, Secret Service, and Jumper, with a bit of Dracula mixed in maybe. So he wants to take them out, and Jake has to decide whether he wants to stay and help them, and now we have our movie. So I have to agree with what most of the critics and reviewers are saying about this film, is that it is a mix of Harry Potter meets X-Men. There's no avoiding it. It's absolutely that. But there is a connection, and that connection is Jane Goldman, who did the screenplay for this, and she also did the screenplay for a couple of the X-Men films. So the first two acts of this film are definitely the strongest. They're the most interesting and most entertaining, as you're discovering this world with Jake and you meet a host of characters. Unfortunately, they decide to focus on a love story between Jake and one of the peculiar kids called Emma, who has the ability to float and control air. There's also another kid called Enoch who's jealous of Jake arriving at the school, but the rest of the other kids, the really interesting kids, aren't developed past what their abilities are, which is a real shame because it feels like a real missed opportunity. And you know that Jane Goldman can tell a good story with loads of characters. She's done it in X-Men. But what you do see of the kids and when they use their powers, it is pretty cool. I really liked Eva Green as Miss Peregrine. So she's what they call an inbrin. So she has the ability to transform into a bird, but she also has the ability to control time. And she uses this to help protect the kids by choosing a particular day in the past, in 1943, where she keeps resetting the day and they live it over and over again, but it helps protect them from the outside world. So they do a really good job of establishing this world and telling us what the rules are, but I want to say that it all kind of collapses in on its own logic by the third act. Maybe that's not the right thing to say. It does get really confusing. Where it gets really confusing is that when they come into the present, they only have a certain amount of time before it loops again, before they can't get back. It's really hard to explain. I did keep up with it, I think, but I can't really prove that without giving away any spoilers. You're just gonna have to trust me. So the film kind of stutters at this point and stumbles into the third act, which is very generic and a bit predictable, which is really frustrating again, because I know that Jane Goldman can do better. She has done better. I also think that the film tries to wrap things up a bit too quickly at the end with a little montage, which would have been quite interesting to see. Overall, I do have to say that the weakest element in this film is the screenplay. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are bits which I did really enjoy, and I get the impression that Tim Burton had loads of fun creating this film, from the designs of the characters to the sets and the visuals. There are times where it feels like vintage Tim Burton, with a lot of his signatures present and correct, like an emo kid protagonist and a gothic narrative with peculiar kids, and the nicest thing is that there's no Johnny Depp in sight. There's even a stop motion animation puppet sequence which is integrated into the live action. It's just beautiful. I don't think there's any CG involved. I think it is traditional stop motion animation. I loved it. And there's even a reference to Ray Harryhausen's Jason and the Argonauts in the third act. I think that is in CG, but it's still a nice nod. It's just really nice to see Tim Burton completely in his element and having fun. It's great. In terms of the performances, I thought they were okay. Asa Butterfield was okay as Jake. There's even a joke about his American accent at one point, which I thought was quite a nice touch. A lot of the A-listers like Judi Dench and Rupert Everett are reduced to cameos. Eva Green's character Miss Peregrine even kind of disappears for a long time. And some of the kid actors did feel like kid actors, but then, as I say, a lot of them didn't get their chance to shine, with some underdeveloped characters. So that's my thoughts on Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, and pause the video if you want to take a closer look at my enjoyment tracker now. Overall, I thought this movie was okay. I wasn't really expecting much going in. I definitely think it's flawed in terms of its screenplay, but it is really nice to see Tim Burton in his element and having a lot of fun. One thing that does surprise me about this film is that it's being marketed as a kids film. I think it's got a 12A certificate over here in the UK. That surprises me because the monsters are pretty scary in this, and considering that their whole thing is ripping out eyes and eating them, and you see that happen, I'd be wary about taking a kid to see this. So thanks very much for watching my review of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Nailed it again. If you can, please give the video a like and don't forget to share the lave.